loved you. With an everlasting love I have called you, and you are mine. I have loved you.
Hello, my name is Father Timothy Tighe, and this is our 176th segment of our Journey of Faith in the Light of the Cross, and I thank you so much for joining us. If we look up on our screen, we see our theme for 176. Moses' second sermon in 1240, which we have in Deuteronomy 12 to 26, reminds Israel of God's blessings for obedience and a curse for disobedience. Words more to remind the exiles in 540 what caused the exile as they prepared to cross the Jordan back to Jerusalem. So we get big pictures, and I hope you surrender to these big pictures. We go to our next screen and we read. This 176th segment covers the core of Deuteronomy 12 to 26, an old commentary. But how is Deuteronomy God's inspired book if they're re-editing? See, this is our question. It was re-edited many times over 160 years, from Isaiah and Hezekiah in 701 to Jeremiah and Josiah in 622 to Babylonian exiles in 598. Deuteronomy was re-edited but finally completed in 530s. Okay, so scribes and scholars had heroically wrestled with the spirit of Moses for 170 years, praying that God Yahweh would reveal his intentions and inspire them to write it into the words of the second law, Deuteronomy. So it is a very big project. We go on to our next screen. Finally, they could write the following sacred words. Deuteronomy 4:2. This is what we want to emphasize. In your observance of the commands of the Lord your God, which I enjoin on you today, you shall not add to what I command, nor subtract from it. This is what tradition came to mean in the Jewish tradition. Do not add or subtract from what has been handed down to you. And Paul quotes this in 1 Corinthians 15:3. I hand down to you what was handed down to me, and he hands down to them the first creed in the church. We go on to our next screen, and we read, the scribes and scholars were aware that they were adding and subtracting, but it was part of a sacred project over 170 years that started with ancient scrolls, probably in ancient languages or dialects. This incredible project made most feel they were truly achieving the sacred and inspired Word of God. So these scholars and scribes felt justified writing, do not add or subtract from these commands, for they believed it truly expressed the inspired commands of Moses. There was no authority to decide what was inspired at that time, so they were the authority. We go on to our next screen. The first section ends with words repeated in the second section. 11:26, I set before you today a blessing and a curse. A blessing for obeying the Lord's commands, a curse for not obeying his commands. And then he commands, cross the Jordan and occupy the land. But be careful to observe all the Lord's statutes. Then in 12:1, we repeat the exact same words of the last sentence. Be careful to observe all the Lord's statutes. Destroy every high place where they worship, tear down the altars, burn their sacred pillars, shatter the images of their gods. We go on to our next screen, and we read, 12:5, go to the one place the Lord chooses. This is important, the one place. One place makes people aware that they are one. It's a symbol that brings them together. David in 1000 saw that the one place that would unite Judah and Israel, the 10 northern tribes, was Jerusalem in Benjamin. Jerusalem is not in Judah. It's right in the line between north and south. There alone you shall bring sacrifices and tithes. There your families will eat and make merry. So it is not just heavy. You will eat and make merry in Jerusalem. Do not offer gifts in any place you fancy. Stick to the one place. Recall Moses spoke in 1240. There was no Jerusalem yet. David captured Jerusalem in 1000, and the exiles in 540 looked to Jerusalem alone as the chosen place. So when they were going back, that was the only place they were going to. We go on to our next screen. 12:29, Yahweh will wipe away the goyim. Beware, they offer up abominations that the Lord detests, even burning up their children. How do different cultures read these words? All goyim are detestable, abominable, and unlovable. Jesus was chastised for not seeing goyim this way. Or should we read, despite the love light of the crucifix, the world is a detestable place full of war and abominable abortions offered to their gods? From what point of view is one reading is important. We go on to our next screen. 13:2, if a prophet arises who promises signs and wonders, urging you to follow other gods, even if the signs and wonders come to pass, pay no attention, for the Lord is testing you. Have no pity, but be the first to raise your hand. Stone him to death for leading you astray. Now, Jesus performed signs and wonders and preached a law different from the Pharisees, and he preached an end of the temple, thus an end of the Sadducees. But none of this made sense until the light of the crucifix. We go on to our next screen. Now, 16:1, observe Passover in the month of Abib. You shall not eat anything with leaven. For 7 days you must eat unleavened bread, the bread of affliction. It is very important to remember that leaven signifies the breakdown process of slavery. As leaven breaks down flour in a corruption process, so it breaks down slaves in a corruption process. Corruption causes expanding heat and causes humans to blow up at one another. We go on to our next screen and we read, so Jesus used leaven to symbolize sin and how it breaks down people in a corruption process. Instead of loving one another, they constantly blow up at one another. We all do. So Jesus gave us a new unleavened bread to free us from the breakdown of sin, to build us up to love one another, even through shame, rejection, and the fear of abandonment. So I hope you see all fitting together. We go on to our next screen. And we read in 17:14, if you choose to have a king, he must be kin, not a foreigner like Herod was. He shall not estrange his heart with many wives, nor by accumulating much gold and silver. They're obviously talking about Solomon. He shall keep a scroll of the law near him, read it each day, and fulfill it. This section is the old commentary on the law. It was obviously written after David and Solomon and re-edited during the exile. Let us go on to the next screen. And we read 18:9. When you enter the land, do not imitate the abominations of the goyim there. A prophet like me, Moses, the Lord will raise up from among your own kin. Listen to him. So Moses is speaking. The D scribes believed God inspired them to write the words of Moses, and Moses said God would send another prophet like him to complete God's revelation, and that's important. We go on to our next screen, and we read, this is what you asked of the Lord on Horeb. You said, let us not again hear God's voice, nor see this great fire, lest we die. The D scribes reminded Israel they were afraid of God's voice and the flaming intensity of his presence and his love. It was assumed they were afraid to see his face. Of course, the New Testament writes several times that Jesus fulfilled Moses' prophecy of Deuteronomy 18:16. He was the new prophet. Jesus revealed the face of God, that humans could see and love him in one another and thus have life. We go on to our next screen and we read Moses' second sermon in 1240, which is Deuteronomy 12:26, reminds Israel of God's blessings for obedience and a curse for disobedience. Words more to remind the exiles in 540 what caused the exile as they prepared to cross the Jordan back to Jerusalem. Thank you so much for joining us on this 176th segment of our journey of faith in the light of the cross.
Everlasting love, I have called you, and you are mine.